I have to admit, I'm kind of a math nerd. Anybody else like math? No? There's some definite, yeah, no. Yeah, so when I deal with numbers, and I'd like to do this in high school, I used to just frustrate my teacher, and Emily, she's in the back there now, it would have frustrated her beyond belief because I was one that didn't show my work. You know, so I would just kind of go through it in my mind, and then when I would get it wrong, it'd be something like I forgot to carry a 1. You know, something really simple, and that's exactly why we want you to show your work. But Isaiah and Eli and Hannah and I were sitting around one night, maybe a month or two ago, just dealing with numbers. And for some reason we got onto square roots and what squared means and things like that, things that they haven't even got to in their classes yet. And working with division and just manipulating the numbers to make it what we want. Now, in life, we go through division in a number of ways. Division isn't always just numbers in a checkbook. It's not division within a math formula. Many times it's division based upon experience. There are many ways that maybe we experience division. Perhaps in a business deal gone wrong. You and your partner are no longer partners. Maybe in a marriage relationship you experience division. You were once together and now you're apart. Maybe there's a close friend or a family member that for years you just haven't spoken to one another because of division. Maybe for you it leads back to something very major in your life and you just can't seem to get over that. There's a separation. Now, in division, when you work with numbers, many times you can figure out that there is an equal opportunity. There's no leftovers, so to speak. It's kind of like if you take 9 and you divide it by 9, you get 1. Right? There's 9 parts, 9 equal parts in the number 9. But when you divide in real life, I don't think that you ever get all the parts, all the pieces. It's more like you take this very fragile china plate and you let go and it hits the floor and it breaks into pieces. No matter how hard you try, all of these big pieces are still there, but you have all these little fragments laying around. And you just can't seem to find all of the fragments that fit in. Has that ever been your experience in life? That when division happens, you're not left with parts of a whole. You've actually got an incomplete piece. It just doesn't go back together. No matter how hard you try, you just can't put it all back together. Well, we're talking about division this morning. Division of God's people, division of God's rulers. And maybe we could go back in time. I mean, we as a country, we've experienced a lot of division. Division between blacks and whites. Divisions between natives and whites. Divisions between men and women. We've experienced these things, a lot of us, even in our own lifetime. And what we're really trying to pursue is peace, unity, bringing the two parts or the multiple parts together again. Well, the really cool thing is no matter how hard we try and we can't get it back together, God is in the business of rebuilding things. And God made it the first time, and He can remake it the second time, and the second time over He can make it better than He made it the first time. Even though maybe we're lacking all the parts. Last week we looked into the life of Solomon. Solomon was the son of David. David, a king after God's own heart. And here Solomon, he's immensely blessed. He is a faithful man of God. He's pursuing after God. He builds God's temple. God not only blesses him with riches and wisdom, but He gives him just about everything that he wants. And he eventually squanders it. Instead of pursuing God as his life went on, he kind of drifted away from God. He moved away from what God's priorities was, and he began to pursue pleasure. Kind of sounds like us in America today. We drift away from what God wants, and we begin to pursue pleasure and what makes us happy. And for Solomon, probably one of the greatest pursuits of pleasure was that of women. And when he was pursuing the women, these women were not just Israelite women, they were women from other countries. And as he was pursuing these women, he began to give in to what the women were doing, what their culture was about, who their God was. And so the very thing that God warned the Israelites when they were moving into the land of Canaan, Solomon was doing the opposite. God said, drive them all out. Get rid of them. Annihilate them. It gets pretty severe, but God is actually saying there's a lot of people in your life that are going to bring you down. There's a lot of people who are going to lead you away from God instead of building you up in God. And what you really need to do is you need to remove them from your life so that you can be strong in God. And so Solomon, instead of driving out those enemies and those influences, he begins to take those other wives and he takes their gods. And when he takes on these women and their gods, he's failing to pursue the one true God. He's exchanging the God of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, all of his ancestors, the God of his father David, and he's pursuing after these gods. And when he's pursuing them, he's not only not pursuing God, but God is pretty specific in that if you follow my commands, if you follow my rules for living, I will bless you. Just pursue me, be with me, and I will be with you. That command is given time and time and time again. Let's go to 1 Kings. 1 Kings in chapter 11, verse 11. So the Lord said to Solomon, since this is your attitude and you have not kept my command, my covenant and my decrees which I commanded you, I will most certainly tear the kingdom away from you and give it to one of your subordinates. Nevertheless, for the sake of David your father, I will not do it during your lifetime. I will tear it out of the hand of your son, yet I will not tear the whole kingdom from him, but will give him one tribe for the sake of David, my servant, and for the sake of Jerusalem, which I have chosen. What we're seeing here in this chapter of the story is the fulfillment of God's promise to Solomon. If you don't obey me, I will take this kingdom from you. Yes, I'll leave you a remnant. I won't do it right now during your lifetime, but your son's gonna come into power, and it's during his kingship that I'm going to remove some of these tribes from your authority. And I'm going to give it to somebody who actually serves underneath you. Now, if you're in the business world, there's probably very few things that are going to tick you off more than this. That you've been working hard and you've put in time and hours and energy, and somebody who's new to the company gets a job or a promotion ahead of you. Maybe it happens in family. Maybe you know that there's a pecking order in your family, but suddenly the youngest comes along and they're the favorite. Right? Some of you know what that's like. Some of you are the favorite, so you're just like, psh, whatever. Anyway, in this story, we see that that's what God is telling Solomon. Solomon hasn't even died yet, and he's getting his punishment for his wrongdoing. And God doesn't stop there. He calls a prophet, and the prophet is going to Jeroboam, who happens to serve under Solomon. Now, I don't know how many of you are actually reading along with the story, and if you were following through, chances are if you're following through with the story, this chapter has probably confused you more than any other. I mean, we have Jeroboam and Rehoboam. That in itself is enough to confuse you. It's like, why do they have to have the same ending to their name? Why do they both have to be Boams? Okay, one's got Judah, one's got Israel, but was that Jeroboam or Rehoboam or somebody else a Boam? I'm not following along with these Boams. Now, to try to make this a little bit easier for you, in the kingdom of Israel, speaking of all 12 tribes in the land of Canaan, from the sea, the Dead Sea down at the bottom to the Sea of Galilee in the north, we have the entire kingdom. Now, Jeroboam was in charge of the northern kingdoms. Okay, J comes before R. Okay, Rehoboam was in charge of the southern kingdom down at the bottom. Okay, J before R, north before south. I don't know if that helps you. Maybe that just confuses you even more. But then you get into some of these other names. For instance, the name of the prophet here, when we get into Jeroboam was a man of standing, and when Solomon saw how well the young man did his job, he put him in charge of the whole labor force of the tribes of Joseph. Solomon saw he was good. God saw he was good as well. And about that time, Jeroboam was going out of Jerusalem, and Ahijah, the prophet of Shiloh, met him on the way wearing a new cloak. Now, you've got Ahijah, and then you've got Jeroboam had a son named Abijah, and then Rehoboam had a son. His name was Abijah. And so if Jeroboam and Rehoboam weren't confusing enough, you get Ahijah and Abijah and Abijah. And so if you're following along, I hope I can bring a little bit of clarity to that today. Well, anyway, this Ahijah, the prophet of God, who was speaking to Jeroboam at the time, remember Jeroboam was a subordinate of King Solomon. He took his new cloak, wearing this brand new cloak, and he tore it into 12 pieces. And then he said to Jeroboam, here, take 10 pieces. Because this is what God is going to do to this kingdom. He's going to divide it. Israel, Jacob, had 12 sons, and they were the 12 tribes of Israel. So anytime you hear about that number 12, the 12 tribes of Israel, we're talking about the descendants. And so he says, here, take 10. You're going to be in charge of these 10. I'm going to leave Judah in the hands of the house of Solomon, and it's going to stay there. I'm going to preserve a remnant. God does this time and time and time again. He preserves a remnant. There's something left over. When it came time for him to destroy the earth, he saved Noah, a remnant. Now we're getting to this time where the kingdom is divided. It's torn in two. God is continually saving a remnant. There's a piece of his promise holding on. And he's going to be faithful to that remnant. And God is continually faithful to us who survive, maybe even by the very skin of our teeth. So God is telling Jeroboam through the prophet Ahijah that this is going to happen. But, as with God, be patient. It's not going to happen right now. Solomon's going to have to die first. Solomon gets wind that Jeroboam has been anointed as this next king, and he's a little angry and upset. At the end of chapter 11, it says that Solomon tried to kill Jeroboam, but Jeroboam fled to Egypt. Well, that's a pretty good idea. If somebody's trying to kill you, get out of Dodge. And so that's exactly what he did. But then Solomon passed away, and Solomon's son, Rehoboam, took over. Rehoboam was given an interesting dilemma. The people of Israel came to him. This is before the kingdom was torn apart. All the people were represented. And they came to Rehoboam and said, you know what, your father, Solomon, he was pretty hard on us. And it appears by the text that Solomon increased the taxes on the people, increased the burden that they had, increased the workload that they had. He was very driven to accomplish more, to do more, to build more, to be better, and the burden fell on the people. And so they were overloaded. And they said, you know what, if you just relieve some of that pressure, if you just take some of that burden off of us, we'll serve you faithfully. So he said, give me 3 days. In 3 days, I'll have an answer for you. So in his wisdom, Rehoboam reaches out to the elders, to the experienced, to the wise of Israel. He said, these people, this is what they're telling me. What should I do? And the elder said, well, if you'll relent, if you'll take it easy on the people, then they will serve you. So our advice is relent. But Rehoboam, he rejected that advice. Rehoboam moved on from the elders and he went to his friends, the people he grew up with. And he said, okay guys, this is my dilemma. Okay, the people who I'm supposed to be leading over, they want me to let up on them. What do you think I should do? They said, no. Crank the vice. Make it tighter. Show them who's boss. This is the kind of world we live in today. Show them who's boss. Just crank it a little harder. Turn up the temperature a little bit. Let them know you're in charge. Let them know you're serious. I can find myself in this kind of pattern of behavior. And that, no, and it's now, and we just move on, we do it. But there's some truths here that I want you to pull out from this. One of the first reasons for division is disobedience. Solomon had it in his life. He could have pursued after God. He could have been subject to God. and submissive to his authority, but he chose to pursue these women and these other gods. And there was a division in his heart, and he began to get what he was actually craving, which wasn't God. We see that carried on to his son Rehoboam. Rehoboam had the word of God there. He could have went back and he could have pursued that, but instead he chose to continue on the tradition that Solomon was moving towards, and that was evil. He could have been obedient to God, but in his disobedience for the truth, he was pursuing self. He was also pursuing something else, selfishness. He was greedy. He wanted to be in charge of. He didn't want to lose power, lose authority. And so instead of being humble and submitting himself to the leaders and to those who had experience, he chose instead to pursue the advice of his friends. Division also sometimes happens when we pursue advice from the wrong places. Whether you're experiencing the problem of division in a business or in your family, or maybe it's with a friend, if you're pursuing advice in the wrong place, it's going to get you in the wrong place. However, if you can pursue the truth of God, it's going to lead you to the place of God. God will continually be there. He will bless you. But when you deny God, when you choose to say, no, God, I don't want any part of that, then you're actually expecting that God, or you should be expecting that God is going to deny you as well. It's a cause and effect kind of thing. Follow me, and I will bless you. Deny me, and I will deny you. And Rehoboam is beginning to experience this. He's experiencing a division. Now, I want to share with you a couple of questions. The first question is this. Who are you seeking advice from? Who are you seeking advice from? Is it your friends? Is it your family? Is it the culture that we live in? Is it the stars that you look up to? Is it the coaches of the activities that you're involved with? Or are you pursuing God and His wisdom through prayer, through reading His Word, through being involved in a church community where like-minded people are on the same journey as you? Where are you seeking your advice from? And the second question, which is a follow-up to that, is, are you listening to that advice? It's one thing to say, yes, I believe in God. Yes, I believe that Jesus rose from the dead and He saved me and He gave me a new life. But it's a completely other thing if we stop it right there and we say, but I'm not going to listen to anything that He says or any commands that He gives me in my life. And the reason that God is giving us these commands, these rules to live by, is so that we can actually experience life to its full. He's not trying to lead us in a path of slavery, but He's actually trying to relieve the oppression that's built up upon us by showing us that there is an instruction manual, that there is a right way to do it. And like I said last week, it's a whole lot easier to follow the instructions the first time and not have to come back to it. God has given us that. That whenever we seek to give somebody else approval for a bad choice that they make because it's wrong, or because we're maybe afraid that we're going to hurt their feelings or lose a relationship, I need to tell you something. When you lend permissiveness to somebody for making wrong choices, that's not love. Does that make sense? Because we have a whole society that's built up on this. Even inside the church, we want to do this. We say, that's okay because I love you. I don't want to anger you. I don't want to upset you. I don't want to ruin the relationship. But what we're actually doing is we're allowing them to live in pain and agony. We're allowing a sore to fester. And believe it, it's gonna cause division. It's going to cause hurt. It's going to cause pain. And sometimes when we seek to help somebody, it actually is going to hurt that relationship. So I'm not going to tell you it's going to be easy, because it's not. I've spoken truth into a lot of families, a lot of relationships, and there are relationships that I no longer have because the truth wasn't accepted. Okay, but that doesn't cease to make the truth truth. Truth is always truth, regardless of whether you and I like it or not. And so when we're talking about God saying, if you follow me, if you listen to me, if you obey me, then I will bless you, there's a command and there's a purpose. It's not just about submission. It's not about slavery. It's about freedom. And so here Rehoboam has got a choice. I can listen to the elders of the church, or I can listen to my friends. Chooses to listen to his friends. It was of God. God knew this was going to happen. He told Solomon it was going to happen. He told Jeroboam it was going to happen. And now the kingdom was ripped from his hands. And so Jeroboam is brought back from Egypt, and he takes the 10 tribes and he goes to the northern country, and he's able to establish his own authority up there apart from Rehoboam. That Rehoboam obviously is evil. He's doing evil in the eyes of God. He's not listening to God. Instead, he's listening to man. And then you've got Jeroboam in the north country. This is Jeroboam's struggle. It's pride. It's greed. It's selfishness. He's wanting to hang on to everything that he's got. One of the greatest struggles that we face as we make money, as we gain success, is we're so afraid of losing anything that we've gained along the way that we forget to take risks. We forget to invest in people. You find that some of the most loving people, the most generous people, are those who really don't have anything to lose. But as we gain, we're fearful of what we might lose, what it might cost us. And Jeroboam was of that mindset. He thought, I've got all of these people. They're all bowing down to me. They're all serving me. God has blessed me with this opportunity to lead these people. But what if they go back down to Jerusalem, back down to the temple that Solomon built, and they go down to worship God and to offer sacrifices? They're gonna go back and they're gonna stay there, and they're not gonna come back, and so the kingdom that God's given me is gonna slip away. And so in fear, he constructs these 2 golden calves. Now, if you read the first part of the story, that whole part about Exodus and they're leaving the desert, there's nothing good that comes out of a golden calf. And he makes 2 of them because he wants to put them in 2 different places so that the people have options. Does that sound like our society today? Well, we don't want to make this too hard on you. We want to give you options. Okay? We want to make sure that instead of pursuing God over there, that you stay right here where it's comfortable. And we'll make sure that you have things taken care of. And so Jeroboam creates these sanctuaries, so to speak. And he puts the calves there. And according to the Israelite history, it's the tribe of Levi. They're the priests. And he appoints priests, and they're not of Levi. So he's constructing his own religion, his own system of beliefs. He's creating festivals and saying, here, worship and dance and celebrate on these festivals that I've given you. You don't need to go back to Jerusalem. How do you think God looked at that? Okay, I've given you these kingdoms because the house of Solomon has rejected me and pursued false gods. Therefore, if you go up here and pursue false gods, what do you think is going to happen to you, buddy? It's not going to be good. So you need to ask yourself a question. What am I pursuing? Am I still pursuing happiness? Am I still pursuing pleasure? And am I doing it in the face of God? Acting in disobedience, rebelling against what God would want for me. Because if you are, the punishment will come. Maybe not now, but eventually. Eventually, it'll come. And it comes to everyone. God is faithful to the good and to the bad. We see a couple generations have passed. We go on to chapter 15. In chapter 15, we get Abijah is becoming the king of Judah, and then Abijah is evil, and he passes away, and then his son takes over, Asa. And Asa is this new king of Judah. Now, if you're getting this, Asa would be a grandchild now. And his grandmother, the queen bee, so to speak, she's kind of leading all of the dissension. She's leading all of this worship to these false gods. Now, this is a very tough spot for Asa to be in. His dad was bad. His grandfather was bad. Maybe this is where you find yourself at right now. You're saying that's all good. I hear what you're saying, but you don't know my dad. or my parents. You don't know what my grandparents were like. You don't know my ancestry and where we came from. That didn't matter to Asa. The toughest thing that Asa had to do in my mind was not to drive out these false gods. It was to remove his grandmother from power. He had to go say to Grandma, "You're doing what's wrong in the eyes of God. I no longer need you here." Maybe the very people that we need to stand up against are those who are closest to us. And we need to say, no, what you're actually doing is completely wrong and incorrect. And we need to speak the truth to them. Not because we hate them, but because we love them and we seek to restore them. We seek to allow God to work in their life to put them back together again because they're going in the wrong direction. So who is it that God is telling you that you need to speak the truth to in love? Who is it in your life that you've seen going down a very destructive path, living in rebellion to God? And God's saying, you need to intervene. Don't wait for somebody else to do it. Don't wait for their friend. Don't wait for their coworker. You see it and you need to address it. Who is that? I want to ask you another question here. Because we've seen how Asa made a difference. I think that there's a lot of people in life that make differences. If we pause and we really truly reflect, we could probably think back in time and come up with a handful of people that made a huge impact in our life. They served as a counselor to us. They given us godly wisdom. They were like a mentor to us. Who was that for you, and what did they do? What did they share? And before you stop at that, I want you to think, who is it that God has placed in my life that I need to be a mentor for? Who has God placed in my life that I need to share His love and truth with and encourage them on their journey to be like God? I can tell you that in my life there's been a number of those people. I can remember growing up in a church in Grant City, Missouri, and the pastor was very loving, very kind. Didn't spend a lot of time there. We were very loosely connected to the church. But he continually went outside of what I felt like were his normal realm of duty to be an encouragement. When I went to another church in a nearby town, there were a few couples that were working in the youth ministry that went above and beyond the call of duty to invest in my life. Mentorship plays a big responsibility, or a big role in that. You can be that same something or someone to somebody else. Maybe you're saying, but I'm not that leader. I don't lead in that capacity. Well, the first time I went back after my freshman year of college, I had an opportunity to speak on a Sunday night service in the Assembly of God Church in Grant City, Missouri. And a woman came up to me and she said, "When you were here in junior high school, ever since then I've been praying for you." Ever since. I was trying not to cry, honestly, at that point. Thought, wow, God is so completely and totally working behind the scenes in a way that I didn't even know. There was another lady at the Christian church in Sheridan, Missouri, away at college. She's always sending letters. You get these letters from this lady that I hardly knew, encouraging me in my walk with God. Every time I would come back, she would come over and say hi. She made it a point to invest into my life. In a small community, and we know about those small communities around, there was a newspaper, and I kind of had the local gossip section. I don't know if you could call it anything other than that. It's a place where a lot of times the little old ladies would write in and say, so-and-so was over at my house for dinner. I remember coming up in that column a couple times. You have no idea how much that meant. What can you do to invest in the next generation or the generation to come? Who is God calling you to speak truth into? Because there's a huge job and there's a huge void. And maybe you need to start with your own kids. Maybe you haven't done that. And you need to be able to engage your kids in the story of God. Maybe you need to go out and be a big buddy and grab somebody. And maybe you can work through an organization that already exists. Maybe you just grab a neighbor kid who's always at your house anyway. And you say, right now, on purpose, I'm going to invest in this child and train them up in the way of God. I don't want you to leave here today thinking about division. I want you to think about unity. And if you're going to bring what's divided together again, first you have to seek God. And you can only do that in humility. Pride isn't going to get you there. Pride's only going to lead you to fear of losing whatever you've gained along the way. It's not going to happen with insecurity. It's definitely not going to happen in disobedience and seeking yourself in everything. It's going to happen from seeking the Word of God, the commands of God, the truth of God, and allowing God's blessings to pour over your life in His time, not yours. I want to share with you as I wrap up a couple of last-minute truths. Growing up in a family that I would say is not Christian, and finding my way to God, I think God directing me in a way to come to Him. There's been some pretty amazing things that have happened along the way. He directed me to a godly wife. How important is that? He's given me 3 great kids to have an opportunity to witness to give them a better footing than what I had a generation before. God not only gave me that, He gave me an opportunity to redeem back in time. My mom is here today. It was during my first ministry in Leon, Iowa, that I had an opportunity to baptize her and to watch her grow in her faith ever since. When my dad's here to visit, he's not a Christian. He comes to listen to me. I'm not prideful about that, but I say it's good. I hope you're listening to the truth of God, and I hope it penetrates to the very core of who you are. Before my grandparents died, and they held a very important part in my life, I got to see each of them reading their Bible, talking about church. How cool is that? Don't let ungodly family lead you to an ungodly life. God has more in store for you. He's a God that makes all things new. He makes the brokenness better. And He provides healing that you'll never be able to experience anywhere else.